I want to take this opportunity to address the very serious and tragic circumstances of the airstrike that occurred in Kunduz on October 3rd. I offer my deepest condolences to those innocent civilians who were harmed and killed on Saturday. I echo the Secretary's comments about the tremendous work that Doctors Without Borders conducts in Afghanistan and throughout the world. They have provided invaluable medical assistance to those most in need in Afghanistan. As you know, the Taliban attacked the city of Kunduz on September 28th. Afghan security forces have been fighting to remove the insurgents ever since. Unfortunately, the Taliban have decided to remain in the city and fight from within, knowingly putting civilians at significant risk of harm. Our forces are in the air to provide training, advice, and assistance to the Afghan forces. While our personnel are not directly engaged in the fighting, they are providing valuable support to the Afghans. Afghanistan remains an area of active hostilities, and our personnel continue to operate in harm's way. Therefore, they retain the inherent right of self-defense. We have now learned that on October 3rd, Afghan forces advised that they were taking fire from enemy positions and asked for air support from U.S. forces. An airstrike was then called to eliminate the Taliban threat, and several civilians were accidentally struck. This is different from the initial reports, which indicated that U.S. forces were threatened and that the airstrike was called on their behalf. As has been reported, I have ordered a thorough investigation into this tragic incident, and the investigation is ongoing. The Afghans had ordered the same. If errors were committed, we will acknowledge them. We'll hold those responsible accountable, and we will take steps to ensure mistakes are not repeated. We'll await the outcome of the investigation, provide any additional updates, and we will share the results of the investigation once it is complete. As you know, the United States military takes extraordinary steps to avoid harm to civilians. However, the Taliban have purposely chosen to fight from within a heavily urbanized area, purposely placing civilians in harm's way. We will continue to take all necessary steps to avoid future civilian casualties. Again, I want to offer my deepest condolences to those innocent civilians who were harmed and killed on Saturday. Additionally, I would be remiss if I did not offer my condolences to the crew and passengers of the C-130 aircraft that crashed on Friday, October 2nd. The 6 airmen who were lost in the accident will arrive at Dover today. These and all of those who have fallen before them are the true heroes of our efforts in Afghanistan over the past 14 years. And I'll take a few questions. Mick, please.
General, your revelation that it was the Afghans that advised the Americans, have you ordered a suspension or change in the current rules of engagement?
Now, I won't go into current or past rules of engagement, but I would tell you that our men and women continue to understand the rules of engagement and follow those rules of engagement. This was a case, again, more will come out from the investigation. That's why we have these investigations. I have had the opportunity to talk to the investigating officer, Brigadier General Rich Kim, who is up in Kunduz now. That's why I pass out this additional information. And again, I want to be able to let the investigation go its course and then provide updates based on that. But I have not suspended train, advise, and assist support to the Afghans.
Those rules of engagement allow for the Afghans to call in American airstrikes, and what kind of fallback or fail-safe system is there in that process?
Well, I appreciate the question, but again, I don't want to go into those great details yet until we get the investigation, and I don't want to cover into rules of engagement in this form at this point in time. But those will come out as we go through the investigation. We'll make sure those are the same type of questions that I know everybody would want to ask, and those will come out in the investigation.
No question, General, if I could. Does this raise doubts? Does this bring into question the current strategy to train the Afghans? Do they have the ability to take over that fight? And does it raise questions about the current timetable for the withdrawal of U.S. troops?
Yeah, I'm back here in Washington to testify to Congress. I'll take those questions from Congress. Again, I've been very public that the Afghan security forces continue to get better and better, and I'm very proud and honored to serve with them. 3 times in Afghanistan, where they were just a couple years ago to where they are today, is pretty astounding. And I think that they continue to be very, very resilient, and they continue to need our support in areas that we've identified years ago that would be very, very tough for any Army. Intelligence, logistics, fire support. So we'll continue to work with our Afghan partners, continue to train, advise, and assist. And again, I'm back in Washington to talk about those same subjects. Barbara?
Just to clarify, so you were saying a couple of points. There were no U.S. troops on the ground at risk in extremis at the time this strike was called in? Is that what you're telling us?
What I said was that the Afghan forces called in for fire to support them because they were under direct fire. And then we have we have U.S. Special Forces that continue to train, advise, and assist at the tactical level. But I think the impression that people got after the first couple of days is they were firing directly on U.S. forces. And what I'm telling you today is, as I've talked to the investigating officer, as we continue to get updated information, that that was not the case in this place here.
Although you don't want to talk about rules of engagement, and I understand that, is there anything you can factually tell us, pardon me, about U.S. troops, U.S. air crews, and the rules that they do operate under to not strike restricted targets such as hospitals, mosques, and schools? People have a lot of curiosity about this, and it's generally understood those are targets that you do not strike. Can you talk about that?
I would just, again, very broadly, we do not strike those kind of targets, absolutely.
Lots of interest in the airplane that was used. Was it an AC-130 gunship or was it a fixed wing dropping bombs?
I think it's been reported that it was an AC-130 gunship. That, in fact, is what it was.
Because
General Campbell, did you authorize, did you authorize this airstrike? Whose initials are on the authorization? Does an American have to authorize for an AC-130 to strike?
That'll come out in the investigation, Jennifer.
And also, was this a RFL? Was it a restrictive firing line?
Again, I'm not going to go into those kind of details. We'll wait for the investigation to come out with that. Louis.
General, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders are calling this almost a war crime. They're demanding an independent investigation because they're saying having this go through military channels is not going to provide enough information on the details. What are your thoughts on that? Would you recommend an independent investigation?
Yeah, first off, we're going to do everything we can this investigation be open, transparent. I've got both a U.S. 15-6 investigation. I've got a NATO investigation, and the Afghans will conduct their own investigation. If there's other investigations out there that need to go on, we'll make sure we coordinate those as well, but I won't go into those details here. Back over here, please.
General, what does this mean for your rules of engagement going forward in terms of air support in Afghanistan? Have you paused the use of this aircraft? Have you paused airstrikes? Or is the war going to continue for your purposes as it was before this took place?
Yeah, again, I'm going to hold that question until we get through the investigation. All right? I don't want to go into rules of engagement at all, please.
Thank you. General, the group MSF has come out with a statement saying that they provided GPS coordinates of the trauma hospital to coalition and Afghan military and civilian officials as recently as Tuesday, September 29th. Did you receive those coordinates, or were they relayed to you by a third party? How did they factor into this targeting?
Those are some of the things that will be asked in the investigation. Will come out in the investigation. In the back, please.
Kim Dozier. Sir, I wanted to ask, Médecins Sans Frontières says that they, for half an hour, tried to get the coordinates and say, we are under fire from both Washington and Kabul. Why didn't that get up the chain of command faster?
Again, that's why we do these investigations. That'll all come out in the investigation. Very detailed explanation of what we know, what we don't know. All those questions that you're asking are the same type of questions that the investigating officer, General Kim, will ask as well. Please.
I just want to make it crystal clear. There were no U.S. JTACs under fire at the tactical level when this airstrike was called in.
And what I said was that the Afghans asked for air support from a special forces team that we have on the ground providing train, advise, and assist in Kunduz. The initial statement that went out was that U.S. forces were under direct fire contact. And what I'm doing is correcting that statement here. Please.
Thank
you,
General.
See you again.
Good to see you too. So just so I understand this, U.S. forces, how close were they to the Afghan forces that called in the strike? Were they with them at the time?
Again, that'll come out in the investigation. I'm not going to go into those details. All the questions you're asking are very good questions. They're the same questions that the investigating officer is taking a look at. I should have a preliminary report here very shortly, in the next couple of days. Again, Brigadier General Rich Kim is my senior investigator. He's on the ground in Kunduz today. I had an opportunity to talk to him this morning. And as I get additional information, we'll make sure we work through the Joint Staff and OSD. I'll take one more question in the back here, please.
General Campbell, would it be more helpful to your forces and the Afghans if an A-10 was flying overhead?
Say that, if an A-10 was flying overhead? What I would tell you is our forces and the Afghan forces continue to work very hard to minimize any kind of civilian casualties. I'm not going to get into different kind of platforms, A-10 versus AC-130. All of this, all the questions that you asked are very good questions. They will come out in the investigation. We'll be open and transparent with this. We'll make sure, again, that there's a U.S. piece of this, there's a NATO piece of it, and the Afghans as well want to make sure that they conduct their investigation. And we work together with all of them. And as soon as we have additional information that we can provide, I'll make sure that we provide that. Thank you again very much.